It's all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a natural bladder doctor, no other than Dr. Nigel Brayer.
Dan?
Welcome to Welcome to Book 101, Dr. Nigel. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I've been a practicing natural wellness physician for the last 28 years, utilizing functional medicine, chiropractic care, acupuncture. So, gratefully, I'm still learning, but I've had the benefit of gleaning years of practice experience, and I'm grateful to share some information today with your listeners.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Nigel Brayer. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. How do you define the root causes of a leaky bladder syndrome in your work, moving beyond just physical mechanics, or just your view differ significantly from conventional medical perspectives?
That's a great question, Dan. Is current medical perspective, as many, unfortunately, as many women have experienced, is a very, I'll call it a myopic view, where we look just at the anatomy and the physiology, which makes sense, right? With any condition, let's look at the parts and the pieces. But what we don't understand, and this applies to many, many health conditions, but we'll talk bladder specifically, is much of the, shall we say, unseen is influencing the function. And so, one of the big factors with all natural medicine, but in particular with what we're talking about today, is we have to look well beyond just the physical components of a system. Modern medicine is very good at dissecting and making sure the pieces and parts are there. But what I've found over the years of practice is most chronic conditions, in particular bladder health, has to do way beyond just the are the parts and pieces there. They do play a role, which we can talk about a little later if you'd like, but they only, in my experience, make up about 30% of the actual cause of this problem. So the question then becomes is what's the other 70%? And that's kind of where I'm blessed to be able to share some insight and information with people, because if you don't look at the 70%, you're going to miss it. So the analogy that I like to think about is if I was a betting person, I would bet on the 70% before I'd bet on the 30%. But most modern medicine is busily looking at just one of the three components of bladder health. And to be honest, that's pretty much the case in most chronic conditions.
Dan Milliman Socrates emphasizes presence, awareness, and overcoming internal limitations. How do you translate this concept into practical techniques for clients managing bladder leaks?
So, like Dan Millman's book, which I'm glad you brought that up, he talks a lot about personal development and a lot about conquering self. And one of the big things that I've noticed personally and professionally is most of the world is busily looking for answers outside of themselves, looking for some doctor to fix them or looking for some messiah to save them. But in reality, is we have most of what we need to resolve most of our problems. We just don't necessarily know how we came about them. So that book was a really impactful for me because it helps you understand that all answers lie within. You may have teachers along the way that help you look within and might help you set some tools in place, but the biggest answer to most of our issues are personal. But unfortunately, we've been conditioned as a society to busily seek answers from outside of ourselves and looking for somebody to fix all of our problems, which is probably one of the biggest detriments to not only our health, but also to a healthy life and relationships and everything else.
Very well said. Dr. Nigel, beautifully articulated. Eckhart Tolle discusses the pain body and identification with ego and past. How does addressing the psychological or spiritual aspects become crucial in helping individuals overcome the shame and emotional burden often tied in incontinence?
So that question's amazing, Dan. Thanks for asking it because it goes back to the three main causers of stress. And so I'll circle this back so everybody kind of understands more clearly. But the three main causers of stress that influence all of us are first physical. So let's apply that to the bladder. Is ladies who've had children, ladies in certain menopausal or hormonal situations throughout their life, those are physiological issues that affect the physical structures. Okay. And so those play a role, and that's where incontinence comes into playing. Is certain times of a woman's life they're more likely to have incontinence, even though around 70% of women by the age of 50 experience incontinence on somewhat of a regular basis. So the question is what are the other two? And the next one is nutritional, chemical, and hormonal, which is going to influence you in terms of toxic load. Do you have the building blocks and raw materials to heal and restore and build your body? But here's the third one that's really important is the mental and emotional stress. So that's where the ego component comes into this is mental and emotional stress. And Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body is the pain body is some wound or something we hold on to, usually in our unconscious patterns. We don't know we necessarily have it. So as we mentioned earlier, Dan, is most people aren't looking within, they're mostly reacting to these pain bodies. So if you've had some trauma in your life, physical, mental, emotional, whatever it might be, is you automatically try to protect yourself. But what's interesting about all that is your body's responding. So in the stress effect book that you have up there is it talks about that your body's trying to manage all of these different components. And when we're in this constant state of fighting or trying to protect ourselves, we're in that mode of purely holding on. That causes our hormone levels to become disrupted. It turns our body into what's called the sympathetic dominant phase. And so when we look at, let's say, acupuncture or traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about balance, which would be yin and yang. Well, in our nervous system, we have the yin and the yang represented as the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And so these stress reactions, and that's why I named that the stress effect, is because stress creates this influence over all of our different patterns. And in Eckhart Tolle's book, he helps us understand is where did these patterns come from? How do we tease them out? And then more importantly, everyone else around us has their own pain bodies that they're responding to. So most of the problems in our lives that others might cause are they're touching our pain bodies and we're touching theirs. And then we're always in this constant state of protecting ourselves. Well, the key becomes not only for physical health, but also mental health is to start looking into and teasing those out so that you can heal them, not only mentally, but also physically.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. Nigel, the stress effect. What is your favorite chapter that you want to share to us?
I would say the last couple chapters, I'm more of rubber to the road type of person. Is if I don't want to know why, I'm a no wire person, but I also like to get things done so that people can feel better and make changes quickly. But I would say the last couple chapters are where we really help people get the take home of this is what you can do today to start really reducing those three stressors that influence your life: the physical, the nutritional, chemical, and emotion, and the mental and emotional.
Indeed, the stress effect, people. Please support Dr. Nigel. It's something to empower us. This text speaks of unconditional love and inherent wholeness. How does this concept inform your approach to helping clients heal, particularly in confronting feelings of brokenness or embarrassment associated with their condition?
That question is really hits home simply because most of us are busily trying to think of the right word here. resisting life. So I like to think of it like a plant. Is what does a plant really need, Dan? Is it needs soil, it needs water, and it needs sunlight. Too much of the sunlight or too much of the water, both will cause problems, but it needs balance. So if we think about our body and our life, is most of us are busily mentally, physically, and otherwise resisting life. And so, what is life? So, life, I equate life to God. God meaning creation of all things, God meaning the one that I'll say breathed life into the universe. But what us humans have been kind of led or tend to do via ego is we put up blockages to that. We think to ourselves, okay, well, I have to take care of myself. I have to protect myself from, let's say, Dan. I got to protect myself from my spouse. I got to protect myself from my children. I got to protect myself. So we're in this constant state of protection. So as soon as we put our guards up to the universe, then we don't allow that inspiration, insight, and growth to happen. Well, the same thing goes with conditions. Is conditions often are related to how we protect and how we resist. So incontinence is not a big it's not a big leap to imagine how our body is constantly struggling. And you imagine your bladder like a fist. If I was holding my fist as tight as I could constantly for days and weeks and months, pretty soon I'm going to lose that ability to relax it and contract it properly, right? So it's going to, I call it fasciculation. Fasciculation means it kind of quivers. So now imagine your bladder, which is in this constant state of sympathetic strain, is fasciculating. Well, obviously, leakage is going to happen. What happens when stress, even more stress happens? It fasciculates. So, what people don't understand is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So, whatever problem somebody has, the way out of it is to start to look at a bigger picture of what environment am I setting up that's encouraging a disease process to occur. And the effort isn't so much in how do I fight this disease, even though short term we might have to do some fighting type maneuvers if, let's say, there's a cancer growth and some of it has to be removed. But bigger picture is how do we remove what allowed these opportunities or these disease processes to occur? And that's going to start in really threefold. It's going to start first by getting our mind dialed in with what we'll call our creator, is stop resisting. The second is starting to remove things. We have to remove toxicity. We have to remove unhealthy food. We have to balance hormones. We have to get our gastrointestinal tract healthy. We have to look at the anatomy. So I guess what I want folks to take home is we're not a victim of our circumstance. As soon as we start to understand that we've created an environment with which a disease process or problem can occur, that opens the door from us to step out of the poor me mindset, because a poor me mindset is left for somebody to fix it, or guilt sets in where now I'm somehow flawed, versus changing a mental script and saying, okay, I have this problem, whatever it might be. What did I allow, or what part did I play in creating this? Is that a mental component? Is it a dietary component? Is it a physical component? And that's kind of the springboard to start taking some steps to empower yourself, but also to set up the environment where your body can be healthy. Much like that plant is, instead of how do I kill off the bugs around my plant, how do I give it the soil it needs and the nutrients it needs? How do I give it the sunlight and the water? And that plant itself has the high capacity of becoming healthy without trying to fight off all the things that could attack it. Does that make sense, Dan?
Makes sense, Dr. Nigel. And as an author and natural bladder doctor, what are your short term and long term goals?
So, short term goal is I'd just like to help people understand that first, this is an extremely common condition, and most women think that since they have it, and this is a lot, it's common to most people, is they believe that they're unique in terms of I'm the only one with this problem. Nobody really understands my problem but me. And then the second thing is if they do feel like that others have it, they're embarrassed to talk about it. I've been around a long time, and I want people to know that this is definitely something that needs to be discussed. There's healthy, natural options available. That's the short term. Long term is I would really like to take a huge dent out of this really an epidemic that's affecting women. Is if we could help even 20% of those 70% of women get some help naturally at home with the protocol that I've developed, I just imagine how we've changed the world. And so I guess that's kind of my big, I'll call it my big platform is if we can empower people to start to take the steps to become healthy, they become better parents, they become better mothers, better spouses, better employees, they become happier, and they don't allow something to control their life. That's empowering, and I think it has a big impact on the world.
Yes, good luck to your goals, Dr. Nigel. Looking forward for your success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author and as well as a natural bladder doctor?
So, as an author, I would say start. So, what kind of opened the door for me is I made a commitment to a publisher, um, and I had an idea, but I didn't have the time. So, I made a financial commitment to make sure that I could get it done, and it gave me a deadline and a time frame, and that pushed me to make time to get the information that I've had over the years onto paper. The next is set aside a small amount of time every day to to simply put your ideas down. Because what I've noticed over the years is I have a lot of information, but it's not queued until you've been asked a question. So if you have a little notebook and you start writing down your ideas or pieces of information that you think that you could use to help others, and then from that is put it into some framework, but don't make it such a big deal. We as people, I've noticed, like to make things into big deals. But if we start taking our little bits of knowledge and not and noting them down, in time they'll just start to take on their own pattern. So in my case, I needed a framework that pushed me to make a little nugget of time so I could get my ideas down, and that was kind of the impetus to bring it to fruition.
Thank you for your advice, Dr. Nigel. And can you recommend a book that influenced your journey?
So yeah, Dan, I've talked to about a few of them tonight. The first one I read years ago. It's a fun book. It's called The Adventures of Socrates by Dan Millman. It's a novel. It's interesting. It was written, you know, the character was from Russia in the early 1800s. Very impactful, especially for adventuresome people. It just kind of helps you understand that the pains and suffering you've experienced, they have value in your growth and development. The second one was A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I think I shared that, or you shared that earlier. I think understanding why people do what they do personally and others really helps first build empathy, because I've in my experience is if I can understand, I don't necessarily have to agree with people of what they do, but if I can at least empathize and come from a position of understanding of why they might do what they do, that really helps me not only help them as a doctor, but it also helps me navigate life better, because most people are busily being offended. And so they're busily taking what others say and taking it as a personal attack against themselves. That book in itself really helps you understand that most things in your life really aren't personal. It's people busily trying to protect themselves from the wounds that they possess. But if you understand your own wounds, that gives you great empathy. And then the final book, it's more of a I'm not sure what to call it exactly, but it's called the Christ Letters. And they say that it's a channeled book. But for me, it just resonates truth. And what that does is kind of a roadmap of where, as human beings, we are destined to go. And so that's something that I study daily, just in terms of helping to build my connection to my source. And so, as we talked about earlier, is if we get more directly connected to our creator, whatever people like to call that creator, on a regular basis, you're really opening yourself up to divine inspiration, which helps us in every conceivable part of our life, and gives us the peace that we're looking for.
Thank you for your recommendations that empower people all over the world for sure. Why do you think leaky bladder remains one of the most commonly avoided and under discussed health issues despite its prevalence? How do your book influence help you tackle this avoidance?
So, folks can learn about how this came about on my website, but I'll give them the kind of the quick version. Is I didn't necessarily want to become the natural bladder doctor. My wife had incontinence after our last child. She suffered greatly for a long time, and I referred her to all the different specialists, the gynecologist, the physical therapist, the pelvic floor therapist, and we went through probably a good year to year and a half. I'll call it drama that was very, very unsuccessful. Now, my wife is healthy. At the time, she was in her early 40s, and there was really no answers. And so it impacted our life greatly. It impacted our ability to travel. It impacted her ability to hang out with her friends. She really started to avoid things. And it looked a lot like depression, to be honest, Dan. So um, I guess the key was, and why this program was developed, is I wanted to help her. Now, I see a lot of patients in my practice. So I looked through my files and I learned that this affected huge amounts of women. So the women that came in for other reasons in my office, I asked them about the incontinence that they had put on their intake paperwork. And all the women that I asked that came in still had that problem. So I came to find out that most of these women just started to accept it. So what I did is I started researching deeply into the anatomy, physiology, and the what I call the somatic response, the neurosomatic response of how the mind and the subconscious mind affects the bladder function. And then over the couple of years, I developed a program in my office that I started using in office. We had an enormous success rate. And then as we worked through these cases with these ladies, I asked them, well, what was keeping you from getting the care? And the first thing that they'd said was the embarrassment. So of course that made a lot of sense. The second was time, and the third was money. So as I developed this program and we had a huge success rate, I thought to myself, well, how can I help women get over the embarrassment of it? Meaning that they don't have to go somewhere to seek help. They can seek it online, they can seek it through a program. They don't have to worry about having these tough conversations. And so I took the program that we had amazing success with and I honed it down into an at home protocol, which we call the Ironclad Bladder Program. So we had a over 95% success rate with resolving incontinence in our practice. And we've had pretty much the same results with our program, with our at home program. So if I can help bridge that gap of avoiding the challenging conversations, reducing the expense of time, and reducing the expense of money, we've really given women a super easy way to get kind of overcome the bladder, the incontinence based issue. But the big issue or the big thing I want to relate, this wasn't something that I was busily seeking, like, hey, I just want to become a bladder health person. And the answer was, I did it purely out of selfish motives, is I wanted my wife to become part of our family again, and I wanted her to not suffer. So there was unfortunately a self-driven motive, but in my defense, I guess we'll say, is it allowed the program to be developed, and now we can offer it to others.
Well, thank you for that empowering answer, Dr. Nigel. Truly, truly inspiring. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season as well. Comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in fifth season too. Geography 101 in its fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. Dr. Nigel, if you could convey one core message of hope and empowerment from your work and the wisdom of these books to someone silently suffering from leaky bladder right now, what would it be?
I would say don't wait. So, the rule of most things is the best time to do anything was yesterday, the second best time is today. And so, every day that a person waits is another day, unfortunately, of suffering. It's another day, let's say, of feeling loss of power. So, most of us don't do what we need to, not even need to do. We don't do things out of fear. And so fear is really, I'll call it the disease of our culture, is what you fear you're destined to keep suffering from. So take that first step. I'll say if you want to go onto my website and look at things, go right ahead. If you want to look somewhere else, go ahead. It's just do something, because as the old saying goes, is insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So I encourage people, take a step, learn, get comfortable, whether it be something I can help you with, great. If not, that's okay too. But take a first step. So don't wait, look, because if it was going to resolve on its own, it would have done so already. If it's still there, chances are the environment is such that it's going to continue. And all things in life tend to morph into something else. So a lot of people will say, oh, well, it's okay, I can deal with this. But what we forget is our body and our life are in process. And so the momentum of whatever process you're in now has to continue and morph into something else. So the difference in what direction it's going to change into has a direct result in what you and I put our energy into, whether that be the energy of changing what created it or the energy of creating more of the same.
Dr. Nigel Brayer, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book and advocacy or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Can you rephrase that, Dan? I didn't get that.
Yes, can you please recommend our ask our guests to support your book, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, I would encourage them to just go onto our website. On that site, you're going to learn all sorts of different components of how you can take the first steps to really regain your personal health, physical health, mental health, and most importantly, your bladder health. So I'd love to be a part of your journey. If you'd like to check it out, we'd love to have you.
Yes, people like support Dr. Nigel Brayer because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books to come, more and more empowering advocacy to come, and for sure, more and more empowering breakthrough to come. So, Dr. Nigel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate this opportunity to chat with you.
More to come, people. See you soon.